The locker that screamed. The basement of the FBI's Regional Evidence Storage Facility was the kind of place no one liked to work in after dark. Rows of gray metal shelves stretched endlessly under flickering fluorescent lights. The air smelled like dust, paper, and cold metal, a place where secrets slept. On an October night in 2011, Agent Evelyn Ross was working the late shift, logging digital evidence for a cyber case. She was alone, surrounded by sealed boxes marked with black numbers and old case codes. At 11:32 p.m., she heard something strange, a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the hum of lights or the creak of the vents. It was a muffled scream. Evelyn froze. It came from deep within row 9, the oldest part of the basement where evidence from closed cases was kept, some from as far back as the 1950s. No one went there anymore. The shelves were covered in dust, and the files had already been digitized years ago. She waited, thinking it might be a prank. But then it came again, longer this time. A voice, faint but desperate, like someone yelling through a wall. Evelyn grabbed her flashlight and started down the aisle. Her footsteps echoed against the concrete floor. The further she went, the colder the air became. When she reached the end of row 9, she stopped. There it was, locker 1207. The scream had come from behind it. The locker was a tall steel cabinet, sealed with a rusted padlock and yellow evidence tape that read, "Do not open, archived, 1978. The label above it said simply, Case File 26A B12, confidential property retained by order. Evelyn's heart pounded. She radioed upstairs. Control, this is Agent Ross in storage. I'm hearing sounds from locker 1207, possibly an animal trapped inside. There was a pause before a voice replied, half bored. Ross, that locker's been sealed for decades. Probably pipes or rats. Ignore it and log off. You're too, he only one down there. But Evelyn couldn't. She was trained to follow procedure. She leaned closer. The steel felt cold even through her gloves. Then, another sound. This time, a low voice whispered from behind the door. It said one word. Please. Evelyn stumbled back. The radio hissed. Then it died. She turned and ran up the steps, straight into Special Agent Ryan Keller, the night supervisor. Her face was pale. There's someone in that locker, she said. Keller frowned. That's impossible. That section's sealed under federal order. Nobody touches those files without authorization. Still, he followed her back down. When they reached row 9, the lights above flickered again. They both heard it, a bang from inside the locker, followed by what sounded like crying. Could be a speaker or something, Keller said, though his voice wasn't steady. He called it in, and within 10 minutes, 2 maintenance officers and another FBI agent arrived. They cut the old padlock, peeled off the yellow tape, and slowly opened the steel door. Inside were 3 things. A dusty wooden evidence box, a stack of black and white photos, and an old cassette recorder, still running. The sound wasn't coming from a person, it was from the recorder itself, though the tape had snapped years ago. The faint screaming continued for a few seconds after the machine was unplugged. Everyone in the room stood silent. The noise slowly faded until only the hum of the lights remained. Keller ordered the locker resealed immediately. The contents were moved to a secure upper vault, pending review. But that night, no one stayed behind. Before she left, Evelyn looked back one last time. The steel door of locker TO7 had started to close on its own. As it clicked shut, she thought she heard something through the thin crack. A whisper, low and trembling. Don't let them seal me again. The case file from 1978. The next morning, the FBI building on Holloway Drive looked calm from the outside. Agents coming and going, files in hand, everything normal. But deep below the ground, everyone in evidence storage felt uneasy. No one talked about what had happened the night before. Still, word traveled fast. People whispered in the hallways that someone had heard screams from the old locker. Others said the sound came from the tape recorder inside. Only a few people knew the truth, that the locker had been sealed under an internal order signed in 1978, and that no one had been allowed to open it until last night. Special Agent Ryan Keller met with Director Hughes in his office that morning. The locker's contents were on the table between them. The wooden box, the photographs, and the broken cassette recorder. Each item had been placed in a new evidence bag. What case was this connected to? Keller asked. The director adjusted his glasses. It's listed as File 26-AB12, classified under Unexplained Evidence, Restricted. The file was archived before digital systems were even in use. So, what's inside the wooden box? Hughes opened the lid carefully. Inside were 4 Polaroid photos, each faded and yellowing with age. They showed what looked like a basement room. Stone walls, a table with metal instruments, and what might have been a microphone setup. On the back of each photo was the same note written in blue pen. "Don't record after midnight." Keller frowned. "Who took these?" Hughes flipped through an old paper report. The case came from a raid in 1978, led by Agent Henry Lasker. It involved a suspect who claimed he could record voices of the dead. He was arrested for fraud and illegal experiments with government property. Was he convicted? No. He vanished before trial. The tape recorder you found was from his lab, labeled as evidence. Kelly. ER leaned back in his chair. So, we've got a missing agent, missing suspect, and a locker that screams on its own. Great. Hughes sighed. Reopen the case quietly. Don't alert the press. I'll assign Agent Ross to assist you. You were both there last night. You'll handle this together. By evening, Keller and Evelyn Ross were back in the evidence room. The recorder had been moved to an isolated lab where sound technicians could analyze it. A thick glass wall separated the observation area from the device. Technician Mark Bailey adjusted his headphones. "It's strange," he said. "This tape shouldn't be playing at all. It snapped right through the middle, but we're still getting low-frequency data, something underneath the static." "Voices?" Evelyn asked. Bailey nodded slowly. "Whispers. Faint. But there's a rhythm to it, like it's responding to something in the room." They ran the tape through an analyzer. Lines of sound waves appeared on the screen. Keller leaned forward. "What's that spike right there?" Bailey replayed it, filtering out background noise. The voice that came through was distorted, almost robotic, but clear enough to understand. "Locker 1207. Everyone went silent. "That's the same locker number," Keller said quietly. Bailey looked shaken. "It gets worse. There's another section." He played a second fragment. "Do not open the box." The sound cut off. Bailey took off his headphones. "That's all it says, over and over." Evelyn stared through the glass at the tape recorder. "Who's speaking?" Bailey hesitated. "It's not one voice, it's 3, layered over each other. Male, female, and something else, like an echo." Just then the lights flickered. The speakers hissed with static. The recorder began to move, the reels turning on their own, even though no power was connected. The technicians backed away. Keller hit the intercom. "Shoot it down!" Bailey unplugged the system completely. The sound stopped, but on the recording monitor, something appeared, a live waveform, like an ongoing signal. It pulsed steadily, as if something was still broadcasting. Keller turned to Evelyn. "This thing is active. We need to find where it came from." She nodded. "Maybe from Lasker's original lab?" "Exactly." They opened the old file, scanning the faded address. 1546 Ironwell Street. Storage unit registered under H. Lasker. Keller exhaled slowly. "We're going there tomorrow." Before they left the lab, Evelyn glanced back one last time. The recorder sat silent behind the glass, its reels still. But in the reflection of the observation window, she thought she saw movement, a faint outline standing beside the recorder, watching them leave. She blinked, and it was gone. The lost lab on Ironwell Street. The next morning was gray and cold, the sky heavy with clouds. Agent Ryan Keller and Evelyn Ross drove out of the city toward Ironwell Street, the address written on the 1978 case file. The road led them through an industrial district that looked forgotten by time. Empty warehouses, broken windows, and streets overgrown with weeds. When they finally found Unit 1546, the gate was locked with a thick chain. A faded sign read, "Property of U.S. Government, Closed Facility." Keller flashed his badge, and the guard on duty, a man in his 60s, let them through. The air inside the compound felt colder than outside. Everything smelled of dust and old machine oil. Evelyn ran her fingers across a wall streaked with rust. "No one's been here in decades," she said quietly. Keller unlocked the metal door to the main room. His flashlight swept across concrete floors covered with paper scraps and empty wire reels. In the center of the room stood a long workbench, cluttered with old electronic parts, microphones, recording tape, and strange metal coils connected by cracked rubber wires. "This must be Lasker's lab," Keller said. Evelyn noticed something odd, a circle drawn on the floor in white chalk. Inside it were 4 auteurs, LD cassette tapes, each labeled with a date: NOV3, 1907, NOV10, 1907, NOV17, 1977, and Deck 1, 1977, she pointed. "Look at the dates. He was recording weekly sessions." Keller crouched down. "And the last one stopped right before the case was archived?" They set up a portable player to listen to the first tape. It began with a man's voice, steady, professional. "This is Agent Henry Lasker, Project Echo, Test 1, attempting to capture residual vocal energy from closed case locations." There was a pause, then faint static. A second voice came through, weak and distant, like someone underwater. "You can't keep them all quiet." The tape clicked off. Evelyn looked at Keller. "Residual vocal energy? He was trying to record ghosts." Keller nodded slowly. "Or at least he thought he was. Let's try the next one." They played the second tape. Lasker sounded more tired, his voice strained. "Test 2. Recorded interference during playback. The voices know my name now. They answer when I ask." Then came the faint sound of a woman crying, followed by static so sharp it made Evelyn cover her ears. The machine ejected the tape on its own. "That's enough," she said. But Keller stared at the tapes on the floor. 4 recordings. What if each one is stronger than the last? He loaded the third tape. This time there was no introduction. The sound began immediately. Heavy breathing, a deep hum, then Lasker whispering, "They don't want to go back in the box." The voice that answered wasn't human. It was layered, echoing, like dozens of whispers all speaking at once. "Return, return." The tape snapped, ending the playback with a loud click. Evelyn shut the player off. "We're done. We're taking this back." Keller agreed, but before they could pack up, something strange happened. From the corner of the room came a faint electrical buzz. A small red light on one of the old tape decks had turned on by itself. "That thing's not plugged in," Evelyn said. The deck began to spin, the reels moving even without power. Through the speakers, Lasker's voice played again. Only now, it wasn't a recording. It sounded live. "If you hear this, they've found another door." Keller froze. "Another door? What does that mean?" The room temperature dropped suddenly. The air turned heavy, pressing on their chests. Evelyn stepped back as the chalk circle on the floor began to fade, the lines smudging as if erased by invisible hands. "Let's get out of here," Keller shouted. They grabbed the tapes and ran out of the lab. Behind them, the lights flickered wildly, and a low rumbling sound echoed from the walls, not like an earthquake, but like something breathing through the building itself. Outside, the air felt normal again. The noise stopped. Keller slammed the car door and started the engine. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "What if Lasker never disappeared? What if he's still in there?" Keller didn't answer. He just stared into the rearview mirror, watching the warehouse shrink behind them. For a second, he thought he saw a figure standing in the doorway, tall, motionless, and holding a recorder that glowed faintly red. Then the fog rolled in, and it was gone. The broadcast inside the building. When agents Ryan Keller and Evelyn Ross returned to the FBI facility that evening, they carried the 4 recovered tapes and the original recorder from Ironwell Street. Both of them were pale and quiet. The drive back had been silent except for the sound of rain hitting the windshield. They entered the secure lab where Director Hughes was waiting, with 2 sound engineers and a recording specialist. On the wall, a large monitor displayed live data from the recorder they'd brought back. Hughes folded his arms. "Whatever you found in that warehouse, I want it logged and analyzed. We'll compare it to the first tape from locker 1207. Evelyn nodded and placed the 4 tapes on the table. "Sir, these weren't just recordings. They were warnings." Hughes frowned. "Warnings from who?" Keller answered softly. "From Agent Lasker, or from whatever he was recording." They began transferring the tapes into digital format, one by one. The first 3 played as expected. Static, faint voices, the same patterns they had heard before. But when they loaded the 4th tape, dated December 1st, 1907, the system froze for several seconds before playing. At first, there was nothing but a low hum. Then came Lasker's voice, distant and trembling. "They want to speak again. They know about the recordings. They know we listen. When the last tape stops, they move closer." Keller and Evelyn exchanged a look. Hughes leaned toward the monitor. "Rewind that." Bailey, the technician, did. The waveform on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat. When the last tape stops, they move closer. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The speakers hissed. A faint whisper rose from the recording. Not Lasker this time, but another voice layered beneath it. "Locker 1207. Evelyn froze. "That's the same voice we heard before." Hughes ordered the power cut, but the system didn't respond. The reels in the old recorder began spinning by themselves, even though it wasn't plugged in. The engineers tried pulling the cables from the wall. No change. The voice grew louder, echoing through the speakers, and the building's fire alarm briefly flashed without sound. Keller grabbed the intercom. "Emergency shutdown! Disconnect power to the entire floor!" But before they could act, a sharp noise pierced the room. A single scream, exactly like the one Evelyn had heard nights ago in locker 1207. Every light in the lab turned off at once. Darkness. For a full 10 seconds, there was only breathing and the faint turning of the reels. Then, out of the blackness, Lasker's voice returned. "They're in the tape now. Don't play it again." The lights came back on. Everyone stared at the recorder. It had stopped spinning. The tape hung loose, dangling from the reel like a torn ribbon. Hughes, shaken but composed, gave the order. "Seal all tapes. Full containment. Protocol." As they prepared to store the materials, Evelyn noticed something on the screen. The live audio feed was still active, showing a moving waveform, but no sound. She adjusted the volume. The speakers gave a soft click, and then, faintly, a new voice whispered, "We're not inside the tape anymore." Evelyn slammed the power off. The room went dead silent. The next day, the entire evidence department was locked down. Every file linked to Case 26AB12 was reclassified as top secret, and the tapes were transferred to a federal vault in Quantico under direct supervision. The official report listed the incident as equipment malfunction and acoustic interference, but Keller and Ross knew better. That night, as Keller packed his desk, he found a plain envelope sitting on his chair. No return label, no handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. It showed the storage room where they had worked earlier that day. In the picture, both of them were standing by the evidence table, even though no one had taken a photo. Behind them, on the shelf, locker 1207 was open. Evelyn called him moments later. "Keller, I just heard it again." "What?" "The scream. I'm at home. It's coming from my radio. The same sound." Keller said nothing. He slowly turned toward the corner of his office where the old recorder sat in its evidence bag. The reels began to move. For the first time, he heard the voice clearly, a whisper crawling through the static. "We told you. Don't play it again." The following morning, security footage from the FBI building showed the evidence lab door opening by itself at 3:17 a.m. No one entered or left. The next hour of footage was blank. At sunrise, the lab lights turned on automatically. Every tape and recorder had vanished. The file was marked unsolved and sealed again, just like it had been in 1978. And somewhere, deep under concrete and steel, in a room no one visits anymore, a faint scream still echoes every night at 11:47 p.m.